Are we really sure they could understand anything at all of our message? Surely the greetings would be incomprehensible, but their intent may not be. We thought it would be impolite not to say hello. Perhaps they would recognize the tentativeness of our society, the mismatch between our technology and our wisdom.
You know, we humans love stargazing and wondering what kind of conversation could we have with extraterrestrial life? And would it be helpful or hostile? But what most people don't know is that the conversation's already begun. And in fact, it began 40 years ago. Josh Richards is the man who may personally take that conversation to the stars. The Australian physicist and engineer is on the global shortlist of 100 volunteers for the Mars One project, a privatised mission to colonise the Red Planet by 2031. What was the first message that we've sent into space to your new potential next-door neighbours?
It's an incredible story to kind of ask, who are we as a species and how do you try and compress all of that down? Primarily the first one was essentially the Arecibo message.
But in terms of looking back with today's technology, it was fairly rudimentary.
Yeah, it looks a lot like Frogger when you actually look at it.
Retrographics.
Very
you know,
retrographics.
Yeah. The most comprehensive message that we've sent to space from Earth was in 1977 on Voyager, the golden discs. What was contained on those discs? What were we saying about ourselves to whoever might be up there?
There's recordings there of blue whales, there's recordings of crying babies, there are choir scenes, there's Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry on there. There's all these different recordings that are essentially capturing what it means to be human.
As the Secretary General of the United Nations, an organization of 147 member states who represent almost all of the human inhabitants of the planet Earth.
It hasn't stopped us imagining what would happen if they heard us and returned the message. From afar,
I wanted to believe, but the tools have been taken away.
or up close.
As the Secretary General of the United Nations, an organization of 147 member states, I send greetings.
But interestingly, NASA sort of censored what they sent, and there was no images of war or crime or famine or disease. Why do you think NASA took that step?
It was a very PC message that got sent, and all of the images of humans had been censored. No clear genitals on any of them.
But aliens would think that we're just like Ken and Barbie dolls with no...
Yeah.
Then it led an artist to send a very intimate picture of humanity into space.
Yeah, well, less so much. I'm kind of glad that it wasn't a picture per se that was sent, but an MIT researcher actually sent audio recordings of the contractions of a ballerina's vulva, which, as you said, very intimate, very open and very honest.
And the democratisation of technology and sending messages into space over the last 40 years has thrown up all these interesting expressions of humanity. I mean, Russian teenagers playing theremin songs into a radio telescope.
I think it's almost punishment for the aliens to transmit something like that. But yeah, it's, again, this opportunity for people to engage.
I suppose one of the most famous and iconic sounds that's been sent into space, and there's been many songs, is Across the Universe, the Beatles classic. I mean, why was that sent, and what do you think that says about who we are?
Words are flowing out like endless rain into a...
These messages that we send to space, are we actually trying to represent who we are, or are we trying to kind of almost send a bit of a prayer, try and send this idea that this is what we would like to be. Maybe this is what we're capable of, this is what we could be like. And the idea of sending the song Across the Universe perfectly sums that up. Whether or not aliens would hear it and understand what that message is, unlikely. But for us, it tells us a lot more about who we are as a species than it does actually trying to tell another species who we are.
A message of love that the record company didn't quite sort of understand. Apparently they were worried about how they'd collect royalties.
Yeah.
Because they owned the royalties and they were being sent out to space. And so there was some concern over whether or not the song would actually make it. And famously, Paul McCartney wrote a note to go with his permission saying, basically, send my love to all my loving. And in 2008, the entire 1953 black and white movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, was sent into space. And if you've ever seen that film, it doesn't really go well for humans. And there's this famous part at the end where Klaatu, the alien, sort of gives this lecture to humanity about how we could better welcome aliens in the future.
I came here to give you these facts. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned out cinder.
Is there some, argument about whether or not what we're sending out to the universe is that, attracting unwanted attention? I mean, is it a message saying we're delicious, come and get us?
There's a lot of people who argue that maybe we're putting out a piece of bait. Stephen Hawking in particular has made the argument that we should not be transmitting messages to aliens if they were out there, because they would basically assess our technology and go, these guys are idiots, let's go and we could send them a disease, or they could do so many different things.
An expression of humanity is difficult to decide on as a group. And that's what's been so interesting looking at this, because for the last 40 years, all sorts of people have been sending all sorts of things. I mean, in 2008, there was a Doritos commercial that was commissioned and sent into outer space.
Doritos ran a competition for people to submit potential adverts that would then be broadcast into space. And the one that actually won it is essentially this animation of little Dorito chips coming to life and carrying out something akin to an Aztec ritual sacrifice.
And very lo-fi, might we add.
Very lo-fi.
Done in like a student's lounge room on no budget to win a competition for a chip company. Because you just can imagine whatever might be out there looking down and going, we need to launch a rescue mission to help these poor triangle-shaped chips that are being devoured by these monsters. I mean, it's crazy, really, isn't it?
It is. There's so much context that's missing, and that's where something like the Arecibo message goes back to that simplicity. Let's use prime numbers. Let's use very basic shapes. Something like a Dorito.
Like pizza shapes, do you think?
Not so much pizza shapes.
So speaking of weird and wonderful expressions of humanity that we've sent into space, you could be that expression.
Yeah, definitely weird.
How does it feel, and what's the process with the Mars One project now?
So at the moment there's 100 candidates worldwide. We've been shortlisted from about 200,000 people who applied initially. We've already had significant delays. The nature of the space industry is there are delays, things run over budget, all those sort of stuff. But we're aiming for 2031 at this point.
And just like those messages we've sent into space from Earth, you can never get those back. And your trip would be one way as well. How will you feel when you look back at Earth, if you make the cut, see that pale blue dot, knowing that you can never come home?
I think I'll be overwhelmingly joyful at the thought that there are literally hundreds of millions of kids growing up on that planet that I'm leaving behind, who will be watching us leave, who will be wanting to grow up to go and be explorers as well. Looking at it as a wonderful, complex, vicious beast that is unforgiving, that is also extraordinarily beautiful.
Nothing's gonna change my world.
What happens if you turn up and you don't bring the corn chips, though?
I feel like Marvin the Martian's probably going to be upset.
We've got the salsa and everything.